Simon Dixon here, and everybody is asking the question, is Trump blackmailed? The reason that's topical right now is because he has completely whitewashed the desire for people to receive the Epstein files. Now, we've covered the Epstein files and the list in previous blogs and previous summaries, and I've shared everything you need to know about that. But what I want to do is hone in on Trump so you can understand a bit more about how the proof of weapons network works. An essential part of the proof of weapons network is that the corporations, the Federal Reserve, the shareholders of the Federal Reserve, the banks, they need governments to be subordinate to them. And so because most of the contractors at the intelligence agencies work for corporate interest, in fact, a lot more than national security interest, the military industrial complex, the financial industrial complex, they have access to the intelligence agencies and the ability to use them in order to make sure that the government is subordinate to them. They've got several tools that they can use. They can firstly invest in politicians that they want to bring up. An example of this is when Peter Thiel invested in J.D. Vance and groomed J.D. Vance to eventually become the vice president. Then it can fulfill agendas that support Peter Thiel's companies like Palantir, which in the Big Beautiful Bill got a massive subsidy, and all of the data that Elon Musk put together for Doge and all of the sensitive data of Americans, like their IRS data, their healthcare data, and all of the different agencies to pull together in order to build a surveillance state technology that, through the Big Beautiful Bill, is saying it's going to be used in order for border control. But it was beta tested in Gaza to do genocide as a service, and the West Bank to do occupation as a service, and in the Saudi Arabia when they did Hajj in order to manage those that were coming to Mecca. And they also integrated it with the drones in Ukraine and built the surveillance state in UK and EU using Palantir with contracts with the UK Department of Justice and various other things. And so through this mechanism, Peter Thiel is able to get these types of technology in governmental contracts by grooming a politician. The other type is through lobby groups. And so the corporations, the largest contributors to politicians' campaign financing, which always comes with a terms and conditions. So whoever invests or issues the loan gets to dictate the terms. And so politicians are just like prostitutes for campaign financing. And the largest contributors are the pharmaceutical industrial complex, the financial industrial complex, the technology industrial complex, the military industrial complex, and then special interest organizations like AIPAC that serve U.S. colonies when the U.S. needs plausible deniability to the military companies like Lockheed Martin and General Dynamic. And Raytheon and Boeing, when they need to make additional sales based upon the Federal Reserve and the banks printing money, and then bills through politicians being sent over through organizations like USAID, which launders money over to Israel, and then the contracts come back to military corporations. And the more war that is created, it creates, a GDP and growth for the U.S. economy. And so they have these colonies which are they invest in Israel. They weaponize religion in order to recruit an army to make people think that it's something completely different to it is. And then they use that in order to destabilize or take over resources or take down countries and then rebuild them, as well as use the International Monetary Fund and various other things. And so you have special interest organizations for colonies like AIPAC, which are funded by billionaires. In that particular case, it is weaponizing the Jewish faith. And so you have Jewish billionaires that are funding AIPAC that are Americans. And then you have the ability to work with the Israeli government and create this plausible deniability money laundering scheme where the money comes back into military corporations by creating violence in specific regions. So now, if none of that works, if you can't, let's say a politician goes off rail, then you always have blackmail. And so we've covered like pedophilia and sex trafficking rings. We've also covered in previous videos black op operations, like funding these operations through drug trafficking, human trafficking at the intelligence agency level to create, for example, if you take over the oil fields in Syria, then you're able to have money that exists outside the system that can be used in order to fund these blackmail and black op operations like Jeffrey Epstein and P. Diddy and for specific industries. So Jeffrey Epstein was mainly focused on finance, tech, and political leaders, whereas P. Diddy was focused on the music industry. And then you have similar things with the Hollywood industry and various other operations. But through this mechanism, money becomes a way of exerting power and sitting above Congress, Senate, Parliament, and judiciary when you can use these blackmail operations. And so we've covered that a lot in the proof of weapons network. But now it's coming up to the question of Trump. So what I wanted to do is turn over to another documentary by Ryan Dawson. Love him or hate him, he comes with the names and receipts. And so we're going to go through a documentary. Initially, I'll just give you an AI summary for those of you that don't have the time to watch the full documentary. But if you're anything like me, you'll want receipts, you'll want names, and you want to go through the whole documentary to really understand how this system works. So that the end is that you can understand how it works. You can invest your time in the right way rather than being distracted by the lies and the media and thinking that your vote matters when it's actually only your money matters. And so you should focus on building economic power and boycotting the system and just using your time wisely. Once you understand the proof of weapons network, you understand how to utilize your time. And so today we're going to dive deep into the question of, is Trump blackmailed? And we're going to go back through his history, his dealings, and also unearth through Ryan Dawson's documentary another vital piece of how the proof of weapons network works. So let's go over to the AI summary and then feel free to dig deep, watch the full documentary like me, and then you'll really be able to answer that question and prepare and help other people. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. So today we're tackling a question that keeps coming up, really, especially with all the interest around the Epstein files still swirling. The question is Donald Trump being blackmailed by Epstein? It's complicated. Our deep dive today is going to synthesize findings from Ryan Dawson's documentary, Trump's Zionist Ball Chain. It offers a pretty specific perspective on the whole environment that shaped powerful figures like Trump.
Yeah, and what's really interesting is how this source material, it doesn't just look at things in isolation. It tries to weave it all together as systems history. It brings up this concept from Simon Dixon called the Proof of Weapons Network. So our mission today really is to explore how this network is presented, how it supposedly operates, and it kind of prompts you, the listener, to think about what it means when power operates, behind the scenes.
That's a great way to put it. So this proof of weapons network, can you unpack that a bit for everyone listening? How does Simon Dixon's framework say it actually works to keep governments subordinate?
Right. So the framework basically lays out three main tools this network allegedly uses. First, you've got investing in politicians, grooming them early on. Second, there's buying influence, campaign finance, lobby groups, that kind of thing. And then the third tool, if the others don't work, is blackmail. And the Epstein saga, well, within this view, it's presented as a really clear example of that third tool, a control mechanism.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the documentary, it really digs into the setting for this, right? New York and New Jersey real estate. It describes it as, I think the phrase was, a cesspool of organized crime and corrupt pay-to-play government.
Right.
The argument there is that bribery, blackmail, it's not unusual. It's just how state contracting works. There's even a quote from a consultant saying, in Jersey, you give money for results, not just access.
Exactly. And the source suggests that within this environment, there's a group described as Zionist ideologues. And this group, according to the source, uses its wealth to push certain interests, influencing American money, media, military power. The documentary basically positions this as the world Trump. And also Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, learned to navigate, even master.
Okay, so following that line of argument from the source, the marriage between Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner isn't just personal then, it's presented more like a merger, right? Uniting two big real estate power wings in that NYNJ scene.
That's the portrayal. Jared's father, Charles Kushner, a convicted felon. The source claims his empire was built with some ruthless tactics. He was a big political donor. But the documentary alleges that when, say, bribery didn't work, he resorted to more extreme stuff. It points specifically to his conviction for setting up a honey trap, luring someone into a compromising situation, recording it against his own brother-in-law, because the brother-in-law was cooperating with investigators. And the film also alleges involvement in setting up Governor McGreevey, similarly, which was later used for blackmail. It's presented as a very direct use of that third tool we talked about.
So what about Trump himself in all this? The source seems pretty clear that he's shown as being part of the same world, navigating these networks to build his own empire. Like for Trump Tower, the documentary says he used S&A concrete, which the source identifies as controlled by Fat Tony Salerno, a big name in the Genovese crime family. And his connection was Roy Cohn, the infamous mob lawyer. There are also details about a judge finding Trump conspired using underpaid non-union Polish workers for demolition work, while a mob-linked union looked the other way. Even his Atlantic City casinos are shown having deep ties to organized crime figures, according to the documentary.
Right. So when you look at all that historical context, these patterns presented in the source, it brings us back to the core question for you, listening. Can someone apparently so deeply involved in a system like that truly be independent? The conclusion drawn by the source material is, well, for this proof of weapons network, a leader with that kind of background isn't a problem. Actually, the suggestion is he's a predictable asset because he already knows the game, he's played it. The documentary asserts the Epstein network itself was created precisely to control these kinds of powerful men. So whether Trump was a direct target or just, a product of the same system that allowed Epstein to operate, the ball and chain, as the source calls it, is presented as real.
So the final thought for you to consider is this. How does understanding this idea, this proof of weapons network, and this alleged historical mix of power, money, influence, how does that change your perception of political independence? Just a reminder, the core research we discuss comes from Ryan Dawson's documentary, Trump's Zionist Ball Chain, synthesized by Dixon. As always, we encourage you to keep exploring these complex topics with a critical eye.